The image that you see behind me was the cover of a National Geographic. I think it was in October 2019, so it was about 2 years ago. And they chose it as the fitting image for issue that was dedicated to conservation crisis and to extinction crisis. And I think it was the following year, the image was chosen by, I think, the readers of National Geographic as the image of a decade, because it captures, I think, our times. And I think what captured actually the imagination and what was attractive for the readers and for followers of National Geographic was that this image actually captures both how the crisis looks, because what we see here is the last male of a northern white rhino, and he is here pictured exactly on the day when he died. And the other dimension in the image is that actually behind the fact that this animal is dying and that actually his species, his kind or taxon, is disappearing with him, there is still hope for the northern white rhino to survive. So in the talk, I will speak about how it is still possible that the northern white rhino still might have a chance. And I will even briefly go through the history and how we got to the situation in which we are. And actually in a few points, I think it will be connected even to what Elmar said, especially when he said that putting something in the fridge makes sense. So we will see that it can actually even give hope to species to survive. So at the moment, there are only 2 northern white rhinos left. These are 2 females, Nayan and Fatu. They are mother and daughter. And we have no signs of the presence of a northern white rhino in the wild since 2008. There were attempts at the conservation in the field. The major attempt started in 1984 in what is now eastern part of DR Congo. Initially, they were successful during first about 10 or 15 years. But by 2008, there were no signs of the northern white rhinos present in the wild. We do not know whether they might survive in South Sudan, but it's for sure that more than 10 years, we do not know about them. Regarding northern white rhinos in captivity, according to records, we do not know about more than 30 individuals that would be kept in a human care. The first were perhaps in the 50s in Antwerpen, but mostly they were kept only in pairs or in very small groups. The only larger group was brought in 1975 to Rukrolove Zoo, which lies about 100 kilometers east from Prague. And breeding, let's say, attempt started immediately after they were transported to the zoo. And it was partially successful. In 1980, first northern white rhino was born in captivity. It was male Sunni. And then followed female Nabire in 1983, in 1989, female Nayan, and in 2000, it's the last northern white rhino baby that we know about. It was a female Fatu. As you can see, the rate of reproduction was not really something that could sustain the population. The first animal came a few years after the translocation, then it was 3 years, 6 years, 11 years. So when my colleagues in zoo saw that the rate of reproduction is really slow, they started to cooperate with colleagues that are involved in artificial techniques of reproduction. Actually, the first meeting was already deep in the 80s. At that time, it was especially focused on detecting the cycles of the females. After the Fatu was born in 2000, my colleagues at the zoo started to cooperate with experts from IZW Berlin. They are top experts in the world in artificial techniques of reproduction in especially in mammals. And they started with the first attempts with what we could say or call classic attempts at artificial reproduction. So it was hormonal implants. They started to collect semen, and they even tried to inseminate both Nayan and Fatu. And these attempts were both with the frozen semen or even with the fresh semen that was collected immediately before the procedure. Unfortunately, none of these attempts were successful in the zoo. So when later colleagues thought what we could do with the northern white rhinos or what they could do to somehow help them to reproduce, they decided to send them in 2009, actually to send the last 4 individuals, which seemed to be still able to reproduce, to send them to Kenya, to more natural environment. At that time, they even thought about sending them to Ira, which would be the original range, but unfortunately, even until now, the places where northern white rhinos roamed for free are too insecure to put them back to this area. So that's why they were brought to Kenya. After the translocation, we saw that the cycles improved. They were recorded or observed even matings, but unfortunately, none of the females got pregnant. And in 2014, so it means 5 years after the translocation, we organized health checks of the females. And these health checks revealed that none of them is able of natural reproduction. So at that time, already in 2014, it was clear that the only way how to save the northern white rhino would be through advanced techniques of artificial reproduction. And this was even emphasized in 2018 when died Sudan. Sudan was the male that we saw in the image in the beginning of the talk. So at the break of the 2014 and 15, it was clear that the only way how the northern white rhino could survive would be within the artificial techniques of reproduction. But these would have to be advanced techniques, not artificial insemination or not the others that we could call regular. So in the late 2015, met group of experts. It included not only people from Berlin, but even from Japan, from Australia, from San Diego in the US. And we got together a plan how the northern white rhino could be saved, despite the fact that there are no breeding females. In general, what is necessary to do is to produce an embryo in vitro. It's here. And we've got basically 2 ways how to achieve it. One way we could call more natural, the other way would be through stem cell research. So let's say we are in the 2016, we still have 2 females, they are still alive now, Nayan and Fatu. So the way how to achieve, let's say, the more natural way embryo is to collect their oocytes, get the oocytes to a laboratory, fertilize these oocytes in the laboratory with the semen that is cryopreserved from males that already deceased, and in this way to produce an embryo. The other way is, thanks to our colleagues in San Diego and even in Germany, and these are 2 main places, already decades ago were stored fibroblast cultures. So it means, let's say, samples that contain live DNA of 12 specimens of a northern white rhino. So the other way how to achieve a northern white rhino embryo is through stem cell research. Basically, from tissue samples, you can reprogram them into something what is called induced pluripotent stem cells. And these stem cells you can later reprogram into, let's say, reproduction cells. So it means into gametes, into oocytes, and into sperm. At the moment, it seems that the easier, or at the moment, now it's clear that the easier way, or let's say faster way, how to achieve the embryo proved to be the way through collecting oocytes from last living donors. We're still working even on a stem cell research, but it's, let's say, more costly and it takes more time. On the other hand, the stem cell research allows us to use larger genetic pool for producing an embryos. The problem that we had in 2015 and early 2016 was that this was a theory. No one has done this before. And we only knew from cattle and from horses that it should be possible, but no one tried with rhinos. So that's why we tried, that's why we started to cooperate with a large numbers of European zoos. And I have to say that EASA was really instrumental in helping to get zoos together. It was altogether, I think, about 15 zoos in 8-9 countries. And when we treated, or actually our colleagues from IZW Berlin, when they treated reproduction problems of a southern white rhino females, which is close taxon to northern white rhino in European zoos, we as well developed techniques that help us later to work with the northern white rhinos. So for example, all the tools and all the protocols for oocyte collection were developed in the European zoos when we worked with the southern white rhino females. All of the tools, everything what you see in the image, these are actually prototypes. When we were sure that we are able to collect oocytes, we started to work on a protocol with our colleagues in a laboratory in Cremona in Avantia in Italy. And again, thanks to genetic samples from European zoos, we were able to produce a first rhino embryo. At the time, it was a southern white rhino embryo. The reason why we needed to, let's say, finalize the whole protocol for developing an embryo is the fact that if you collect oocytes and you try to freeze them, it's completely different from freezing a semen or sperm. Semen is relatively easy, so even some, let's say, samples that were collected 20 or even more years ago are still now viable and we can use them. But if we started or tried to freeze the oocytes, the chances of their destruction, or the rate of their destruction was too high. So for this reason, we actually had to develop the whole protocol, because otherwise it would not make sense to try to collect the oocytes from the last northern white rhino females in Kenya, because during the transportation to Europe, we would likely lose them, because if we didn't have a chance, to turn them into embryos, we would not be able to somehow store them. So only after we were able to produce southern white rhino embryo, we felt, let's say, confident enough to get to Kenya. It was in the summer of 2019, and in cooperation with KWS and with many other institutions, we were able to conduct the first oocyte collection from a northern white rhinos. It was from both Nine and Fatu at the time. And logistically, it was kind of challenging procedure, because overnight we had to get them to a laboratory in Italy. But everything went well, and about 2 weeks later, we could announce that we achieved first northern white rhino embryos through IVF, actually through ICSI, to be made. And it was one of the really big steps that actually gave hope to the northern white rhino that they could survive. By now, we conducted 7 procedures in Kenya. Unfortunately, after the first 2 procedures in 2019, we could not travel to Kenya for more than 8 months. So it delayed production of more embryos. As for now, we have 12 northern white rhino embryos. As I said, they are made in a laboratory in Cremona in Italy. When they reach the, let's say, stage that we call blastocyst, we cryopreserve them, and in future we hope that we will transfer them into southern white rhinos, so it means into a closed taxon of a northern white rhino. The reason why we cannot transfer them into the northern white rhinos is that none of the females is capable of reproduction anymore. Regarding the embryos, 11 of them are from Fatu, so it's the last northern white rhino that was born, and from Suni, this is the male that was born in Vukovar Zoo in 1980. So even from this, it's pretty clear that the role of zoos in a conservation in specific, let's say, taxons can be crucial. As I said, now the next step that we would like to conduct is embryo transfer. The major obstacle that we have to overcome is to actually indicate when is the right time to put an embryo into a female that is, let's say, surrogate mother for an embryo. For this reason, we closely cooperated with KWS, and they located a southern white rhino pool that is well represented in the population of southern white rhinos in Kenya. We sterilized him, and he will indicate the estrus of a possible surrogate mothers at Olpejeta. We hope that it will come in coming months. If I somehow summarize it and put it into context of this conference, then I would say that we see here that conservation in field, that ex situ breeding program, and let's say regular artificial reproduction techniques failed to save the northern white rhino. And the only way, and we hope it will not be only for northern white rhino, but we see that, it seems that the Sumatran rhino might be in row as well, is that the only chance to survive lies in high-tech approaches and in, let's say, novel thinking about what tools we might utilize for conservation. Because to be honest, most of the things that we do comes from human medicine. Of course, if we use new tools, it brings even new challenges or emphasizes challenges that we had to face already before, but maybe in a more direct way. So one of the major things is that we have to consider sensitive or make sensitive ethical solutions or decisions. To be honest, if you use completely different taxon and if you use animals, for procedures that might be demanding for them, it's a question whether saving a taxon or saving a species somehow justifies procedures that you do on the other animals. Of course, that some of the techniques might be even very expensive. On the other hand, here I have to say that our experience from the project with the Northern White Rhinos is that this could be actually even opportunity to bring new resources to the world of conservation. So resources that would be otherwise spent somewhere else. And another challenge that might not seem, so let's say pressing, but sometimes extreme interest of media and public can interfere with the work that you do when you work with the new tools of conservation. So thank you very much. I do not know whether everything was comprehensible. So if you have questions, I'm happy to answer it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Hanzo. It was really exciting to see the progress of the technologies. And I think that's only, we should wish you good luck and really learn from this story to invest even more in the research of those technologies in wildlife. And yeah, do you have some questions here from public, or do we have some in Zoom? Yeah, we got one. Okay, we have a question from Miriam. Thanks for presentation. And asking about the ethical consideration you mentioned in this project. And yeah, so she is asking whether the aspect of the project has been consulted with ethicists or philosophers.
Yes, as you see in the right bottom corner, we cooperate with University in Padova, and we cooperate with the colleagues. There is a professor in ethics in let's say, animal breeding. So actually any step that we do is conducted after we discuss it internally and after we arrive to ethical decision or solution. So yes.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Perfect. And yeah, do we have some other question? Elmar? Yeah, please wait. Mic is running. Kachka, come on.
Let's see. So I remember there was a paper, was it last year, that with lots of authors, which highlighted that that we shouldn't give up on a species just because there's so much conservation action needed, and sometimes it becomes a bit daunting in our eyes, and then people may say, hey, okay, this one's pretty much dead anyway already, just let it go. Well, that paper actually said the opposite, said like, no, wait, it's not the problem that's so large, it's that the resources that we're using are too small, and it shouldn't be an argument for saying, let's just give up on a species. Has that been useful for you as working on the species as well? Because I can imagine that when people say that, you also start to have your doubts, like, is this still worth the resources?
Yeah, we face very often let's say, criticism that the money that goes for saving the Northern White Rhino could be used somewhere else. But to our experience, actually, this is not the case, because the money that we brought to the project are actually from German Ministry for Research and Education and from some foundations that actually like the innovation aspect of our work. So I'm sure that they would not put this money into conservation, for example, in field, because it's not something what attract them. but to develop new tools that can help in conservation, this is what they see as the way they want to fund. So even with other species, I would not give up, before trying something, because it's not like, I would say that there is a plenty of resources, but they are spent for wrong causes. So just to convince people that they should spend money for this, and it can bring really more, let's say, funding to conservation.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I would just add on top on this that, yeah, it's widely known that in situ conservation should be priority, and it's also the cheapest way how to save the species and the most effective way, because it's preserving all the conservation roles and everything around. And it also shows that the later we act, the more expensive the conservation is. So it's basically not only showing that we can do a lot on the late stage of the conservation process, but also highlighting that with the other species, we probably should start earlier and invest more in the initial stages where we can make more change for the smaller money. So I think
I just definitely do not want to pretend that this approach, it should be something like a major direction in conservation, something like this. Not at all. It's just that now, let's say we have more options or more opportunities, and it brings, I would say, hope for more species to survive.
Good. So thank you very much, and thank you all for listening. We are now approaching the coffee break and the poster session. So I can announce that the poster session, it's not only outdoors, but also here on the screen. So the online posters will be presented here. So if you want to stay or come back and look, so you have 40 minutes also to share maybe some questions with our online participants. So you can watch the posters here. And yeah, thank you so much.